The extremist government of Syria is currently committing massacres against the Alawites, Christians, and other religious communities. Watch my video and raise the alarm.
Hundreds of people from Syria's Alawite religious minority have been killed in the worst violence there since the fall of dictator Bashar al-Assad in December. I'm joined now by Daniel Gerlach, a Middle East expert and editor-in-chief of Zenith magazine. He's recently also returned from Syria. Great to have you here, Daniel. Now, it's been about 3 months since the abrupt collapse of the Assad regime, now this very concerning violence. How worried are you about what's happening in Western Syria?
Extremely worried. I think what we see there is not only clashes between security forces and so-called remnants of the old regime that also exists, but also something that I call ethnic cleansing. It's not only about revenge killings, because when you talk about revenge killings, it means like you take revenge on someone. But this is like random assassinations, looting of houses, and the Alawite community is in fear because they have absolutely no protection.
I want to ask you more about the Alawites. You just said, and you've also tweeted, our Alawites are not remnants of the Assad regime. Most don't wish for the return of the Assads. The Assad, a family that ruled Syria, are minority Alawites. Are they becoming scapegoats, I guess, for the atrocities committed by the Assad regime and, you know, this sort of talk of collective punishment?
Absolutely. And
here are some comments under this video. I'm an Alawite from the Syrian coast, Latakia City. There are thousands and not hundreds of Alawites that have been killed in the last couple of days. Please be honest and help us make our voice reach to the international community. We are pleading for help. Protect us. We are being cold-bloodedly killed in Banyas, Western Syria, because we belong to a different sect. We are not remnants of the previous regime. We are innocent civilians. Entire families have been killed. Elders, women, and children, doctors, and engineers who have had nothing to do with war. We are innocent. Please save us. In 48 hours, thousands of innocent Alawites were brutally killed. Entire families and villages were wiped out. They documented their crimes in countless videos like they did 7th of October. The international community is demanded to take action and save Syria's religious minorities. I have relatives in Syria. Entire villages were brutally killed, including kids, women, and elderly. I'm Syrian and I live near this whole conflict. I got relatives and friends who were brutally killed with their families. There's literally zero protection for the Alawite community. It is scary. Please read this. I'm from west of Syria. The Alawites are being killed in the streets. At first, the situation was simply the Syrian army is fighting a small Assad loyalist forces. But those forces are claiming that they are trying to protect the Alawites because the Alawites have suffered a lot recently. The Syrian army harmed and killed a lot of Alawite civilians while fighting those forces. After that, the jihads from Idlib and other cities invaded the coastal cities in front of the government's eyes, claiming that they are giving backup to the Syrian army. Those jihadis are trying to kill every Alawite in the country, claiming that they have killed all the Alawites in some cities, like Banyas. Now the situation is out of control. Even the government can't control the situation anymore. Alawite families are being bombed and killed. In some villages, they are trying to hide in forests and mountains. Those Alawites are not armed. They can't even defend themselves. And the government didn't have the intention to help them because the situation has reached the Western media. They are claiming that they are trying. How all these thousands of jihadis entered the coastal cities, fought next to the Syrian army in some places, and get their hands on heavy weapons without the support of the government. Now the government claims that the army is fighting those jihadis. Fighting loyal Assad forces is just a justification to a lot of massacres happen to the Alawites. I am writing with deep sorrow and urgency regarding the horrific massacres that took place today in Latakia, Syria, where scores of Alawite civilians were brutally killed. The escalating violence and targeted attack against this community are deeply concerning and demand immediate international attention. Reports indicate that more than 3,000 civilians have been killed in a brutal, barbarian way today and yesterday. The scale of this atrocity highlights the urgent need for humanitarian intervention and accountability to prevent further bloodshed. I cannot scroll my Facebook page without seeing any of my friends, relatives, neighbors who are deeply in fear and danger. I know many of the victims. Not only that, but I ended up in the hospital today because of a panic attack about my family and relatives. I urge you to raise awareness about this tragedy and push for action from the international community to protect innocent civilians and ensure justice for the victims. Every moment counts, and silence is not an option. And once again, Donald Trump was right. Donald Trump knew exactly what was going to happen, along with Tulsi Gabbard.
So I've watched Assad, and I've watched a little bit on the other side. The problem is the other side of Assad, we have no idea who they are. They probably are ISIS. I'm saying, are we better off with Assad? We have no idea who these people are. We give them weapons, we give them ammunition, we give them everything. Aaron, we have no idea who, I mean, maybe it's worse than Assad. So what are we doing? Why are we involved? We have to get rid of ISIS, very importantly. But I look at Assad, and Assad to me looks better than the other side. And you know, this has happened before. We back a certain side, and that side turns out to be a total catastrophe.
I shed no tears for the fall of the Assad regime, but today we have an Islamist extremist who is now in charge of Syria, as I said, who danced on the streets to celebrate the 9/11 attack, who ruled over Idlib with an Islamist extremist governance, and who has already begun to persecute and kill and arrest religious minorities like Christians in Syria.
I understand.
Why that should be acceptable to anyone is beyond me.
It shouldn't
is
be.
certainly
and
not
I
in our
understand.
interests.
So we see what the adults in the room thought about the situation. Let's see what the media had to say about it with their fawning, disgusting coverage.
An outstretched hand and clear expectations. That's what the German foreign minister said she traveled to Syria with. But she didn't get the handshake when she met with Syria's de facto leader. Accompanied by her French counterpart, she urged the new leadership to govern for all Syrians, guarantee equal rights for all, including women and minority groups.
A better future for Syria means an inclusive, peaceful transfer of power, reconciliation and reconstruction. This requires a political dialogue involving all ethnic and religious groups, involving men and equally women. They all must be involved in the constitutional process and in a future Syrian government. In our talks today, we made clear Europe will support.
This is one of the most diverse countries in the Middle East with multiple Christian and Muslim sects. And you can see it here in the old city, all the different quarters, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, they're all here. And they want to believe they have a space now as Syria embarks on this new chapter.
Hey there, news enthusiasts. Today, we're diving into a historic moment in international diplomacy. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock and French Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna have just wrapped up a significant visit to Damascus, meeting with Syria's new de facto leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa. This visit marks the highest-level Western engagement since the fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime on December 8, 2024. Syria is now under the leadership of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, an Islamist group previously designated as a terrorist organization. HTS has promised to govern inclusively and bring some much-needed stability to the war-torn country. This historic visit is a beacon of hope after Syria's devastating 13-year civil war.
The first official U.S. delegation to visit Syria since Bashar al-Assad's fall met with the country's new leader in Damascus today. Assistant Secretary of State Barbara Leaf calling the talks, quote, quite good, very productive and detailed. She also says Ahmed al-Sharaa came across as, quote, pragmatic. The former jihadist is trying to ease international concerns about his interim government. He is the head of HTS, an Islamist group previously designated a terrorist organization by the State Department. And we've just learned the U.S. will remove its $10 million bounty on al-Sharaa after today's talks.
But Ahmed al-Sharaa, which is how he's being referred to now, as opposed to his jihadist name that the U.S. has been using for quite some time, did have this meeting with Barbara Leaf, Roger Carstens, who's in charge of hostage affairs, as well as Daniel Rubinstein, who is a newly named envoy for Syria. So By all accounts, this was a productive meeting. It lasted for quite some time at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It seems like they covered a lot of ground. Certainly, al-Sharaa wants the Syrian economy to get up and running again, which means asking the U.S. to remove sanctions. Meanwhile, the U.S. is pushing for an inclusive, representative government that will include women, minority, different sects, and that's why we're hearing Leaf talking about sort of moderate and pragmatic responses.